Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'll be coloring in Exploratorium, or the new title of it is called Fright and Seek by Lei Melendres. I am continuing my scavenger hunt item list, and this is number 9, Pumpkin. Phew, I am almost done with my list of items. Check out Danny Button's channel for the original scavenger hunt tag and my other videos on the previous items I've colored for the tag. This page is called Graveyard. We have tombstones, gnarly looking trees, a rundown church, and all these alien creatures which I will turn into ghosts. I've done ghost-like creatures in a few other pages. In Fright Night, I used a traditional Halloween color palette, orange, purple, and green, but I made the ghosts more off-white with a little bit of reflective color. For this book, I was influenced by Erin from Erin K Designs channel. I really liked her concept of coloring all the aliens one color and then having more of a limited color palette for the rest of it. It brings a cohesiveness to the chaos. This page is Haunted House. I wish that I would have done more of a grayscale background with green ghosts, but for some reason I chose a more complementary color scheme. So all my ghosts on this page are green with just a little bit of blue accent. Influenced by this picture, I'm going to keep the background pretty neutral, and I'm going to try out a slightly different way of creating a ghostly look. I'm also going to make the little pumpkin guy stand out. So for the alien ghost creatures, first I'm going to use some white gouache and fade out the black lines. This gouache is by Fine Touch, which is a Michaels brand. And I'm just going to squeeze a little bit on this palette here. I'll have to replenish after a while, but I'll start out with just a little bit. And then I'm going to have a little dish of water off to the side. And that way I can dip my brush into the water, mix just a little bit of water in that gouache. I'm looking for a translucent color, still to cover the black lines, but not completely white them out. All right, and this process will take a while, so I'll do a few of these little characters for you on camera, and then I'll finish off camera. All right, finished with those. So as you can see, you can still see the outlines and the shapes, but it just kind of faded the black lines. So while those get to dry, I'm going to start the tombstones. And I'm going to use 3 shades of gray, a really light, cool gray, and then a medium and dark gray. All right, I'm going to start with my lightest gray, and these are more of a cool tone grays, and I'm just going to go through and just do a base coat in each one of these. And then I'm going to take my darkest gray, and that is going to define more of the shadow areas and little crevices inside those tombstones. And then I can take the medium gray and just help blend those two together. All right, I'm going to do a few of these for you. I'll speed up the video, and I'll probably finish them all off camera and then come back when I'm done. the tombstones, I'm gonna pick up the book and bring it a little bit closer and pan it around so we can get a better look. I think the strong shadows in here go good with nighttime, because at night I think you would have a strong contrast between light and dark, and the cool gray works good for the tombstones. All right, next I'm going to be working on the church and this rock structure. I'll be using my Waterbrush with my Inktense color palette. I don't remember which YouTube artist I saw this from, but it's genius. The book is just a cheap photo book from the drugstore, folded with some watercolor paper in the sleeves, and just scribbled Inktense on the watercolor paper. And then you use your water brush to pick up the color. And then you have the plastic sheet on the other side to use for mixing or watering down the color. I'm wanting these structures to blend in rather than stand out, so that is why I've decided to use more of a watercolor look. I'm going to be using this sepia tone here. All right, I'll get a little extra piece of paper right here so I can check the color. And I just dab the water brush into this scribbled section here. And then I can use that plastic cover to kind of see how much water I need to add. So I want it to be a little bit fainter than that, so I'm just going to squeeze out more water. And then I will add it to the church. You can start out lightly and then just add more or not quite so much water if you want to build up the color. When it dries, it does dry even lighter than this. I feel like with Inktense you have to work fast and in small areas, so I'm just trying to hurry and move this color around, but I'm okay that if it's not completely even. I want that kind of watercolor look where there's some darker and lighter shades. All right, and then I'm gonna go into this dark chocolate color. It has a little bit more of a red or purple hue, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of that for a shadow. Okay, and I'm wanting to add a little bit deeper shadow, so I'm just trying to figure out which color would be best. And I think the ink black will work good. It still has kind of a warmer hue to it. So I'm just going to add that to my areas that would have the darkest shadows. And to clean off that plastic sheet, you just take a towel and wipe it off. Some of them I've left on there, so they're kind of dried on there, but if you were to get them wet and then wipe them off, it would come right off. As you can see, it did go through the paper a little bit, but it looks more intense now because it's wet. Once it's dry, it's not as noticeable, although it still can come through a little bit, but it's not as dark as that. All right, I'm going to work on this rock structure, same type of technique and using some of the same colors. I'll speed it up and come back to you in a little bit. All right, here it is finished, the church and the rock structure. I like it because it's very subtle. It doesn't bring too much attention to the page. Next, I'm going to be working on these trees, and I'm using more of a olivey brown tone, so more browns with like yellows and greens in them. I'm going to start with my lightest shade, working a base coat all the way through, being a little bit heavier on those shadow areas. All right, now I'm taking a darker brown shade and just going into those deeper crevices, more shadow areas. And then I'm taking a colorless blender pencil. It is by Prisma color, and just smoothing out and blending those two colors. Normally I would take a third color and incorporate that for blending, but I really like the way just the two colors are kind of able to stand out on their own, creating that kind of rich contrast between the light and the dark. After the darkest shade, before I blend, I do go over it with that first shade again, just to add a little bit more pigment on there, so that way when you use the blender, it can kind of help move around the color a little bit better. I finished the three trees, and I think they do a really good job at framing the page. I wasn't sure what this was, but I decided it was going to be a tree root, and that's wrapping itself around the tombstones. For the ground, I'm going to use 3 shades of brown. I have a medium shade that I'm doing a base coat first. And then I'm going to take a darker brown, like the darkest brown I can find in my color palette. And I'm just getting into the little creases and shadow areas. And then I'm going to take that more yellowish tone brown and just kind of go over all those areas real lightly. And this way I want some strong shadow areas, and I want some areas where it looks patchy, like dead grass, or where the light is kind of shining on little areas. So yeah, I'll take my blender pencil and just blend those, but still keeping that kind of dark and light aspect of it. For the flowers that are growing on either side of this graveyard description, I want those colors to be a little bit more washed out and bland looking. So I'm going to take the same watercolor technique. That way they're not too vibrant. I don't want them to stick out too much. And I'll be using a little bit of more golden yellow for the centers of the flowers, the sepia tone for the petals, adding a little bit of like reddish tones to there, and then a more of a grayish color for the leaves. All right, I'll move this around a little bit and zoom in and just show you what I've done so far. You can get a closer view of it. Now the fun part, the ghosts. I'll be using a close to my heart water-based ink pad in Breeze and some of these more dense makeup brushes to apply the color. Sponge daubers will also work great too. Color pencils are going to be the shades of aqua green and a really pale green shade. I'll do a few of these on camera so you can see the technique, and then I'll finish the rest off camera, but still doing the same technique. I'll do a little test sample here just to see how much pressure I apply and how much ink will come off. So I'm going to add some of this color right on top, just going right over that painted little ghost creature here, and not worrying about making an even shade of color. I'm okay with it being a little blotchy, a little heavier in some areas. That will just help create that ghostly effect. I'm taking this really fine or thin shaped brush just to get into some of these little long skinny areas. I'm not going to be too careful when it's next to something dark, but since it's next to that tombstone that's pretty light, I don't want that color to come onto there. All right, so I'll go ahead and speed this up. I am going to try to leave the eyes and the teeth white. And for my little pumpkin guy here, I'm just going to do his body. All right, next I'll take my color pencils and I'm just wanting to create a little bit more shadow effect on them. So I'll start out with this medium shade. And then I can blend with that really pale green. It doesn't distract too much from the other ink color, but it does give a slight kind of yellow glow in certain areas. And then I can take the really dark color and add even more shadow areas or dimension. All right, all finished with those. I think they turned out great. They definitely have a ghost feel to them. I also finished the skull down at the bottom and the skeleton fingers kind of poking out of the ground. I used a really light tan color and then some colored pencils to define the shadows. For the ghost, I also ended up outlining around each ghost. It took a little while, but not too bad, but I just felt like I wanted to define the glow of the ghost look a little bit more, and that seemed to do the job. So there's a few characters here that have not been colored. So I have this little dog and a little creature back there, and then there's another one somewhere right there peeking through. These I leave white. They're the ones over here on the side that you're supposed to kind of find and seek. So in all my pages, I just leave them white. Some of them, they're just so small that you can't even hardly see or make out them. So also the pumpkin head, I left white because I'm going to color him bright orange. That way he is kind of the center focus of the page. All right, so I'll be using 3 shades of orange. I have this nice kind of yellow orange here, and then I'll have a medium orange and then a dark orange. I'm going to add a little bit of glow to that flashlight and hit this little ghost here in the head with the light. So just doing a nice base coat of the first color. And then coming in with a dark shade to get around these ridges. Okay, now I'm taking my blender and just blending those colors together, making it nice and smooth. This little guy is so cute. I love the way he stands out. I'm going to add some dark gray right underneath his head here just to give it a little bit of shadow. And then I'll use that olive tone green and do the stem on top of his head. Okay, and then adding just a little bit of light yellow to the flashlight and a little bit more yellow glow on the head. And for this candle here, I don't want it to be very bright. Again, I want my pumpkin to be the brightest orange, so I'm just going to faintly do some orange and yellow in that little candle flame. For this big page description box that looks kind of like a tombstone, I'm going to take some pan pastel and the soft tool here and just spread kind of a light layer but very blotchy, kind of distressed looking all around. And I found if you get a little too heavy-handed with the pan pastel, a kneadable eraser works great to take that away. All right, the last step I'm going to do for this page is using a white Posca marker, and I'm going to find my inner Dee Dee Willingham. She does amazing work with misty skies or kind of foggy, smoky looking skies. So I'm going to try this technique out with the Posca pen. My Posca pen is starting to run out a little bit, so some of my lines will be faint and then sometimes it will get kind of blotchy, which will actually work to my advantage here. So you just basically run a little line, and some of them I'm going to go over the ghost, some of them I'm going to go behind, and I just run my finger across, kind of smudging it a little bit. I don't want the whole ground and sky to be covered in this misty fog, but I do want to have a little bit, just to give it more of that spooky kind of graveyard look. Here is the completed page, and just to show you the difference between artificial sunlight inside to this natural light outside, I think is a huge difference. It really brought out the color of the ghosts. I'm happy with the overall look and mood of it. It definitely has a spooky vibe. All the different mediums worked well together, and I'm glad I chose a different coloring technique for the ghosts than in my other pages. My favorite part is still the little pumpkin guy. Thanks for watching, everyone, and happy coloring!